In this series, I'm visiting some of Britain's most outstanding areas of natural beauty to explore the fascinating wildlife that have made these places their home. The wetlands of Somerset are some of our most valuable wild areas. They're absolutely teeming with rare species. And in this programme, I'm really looking forward to having a look and see what's here. While I'm here, I'm hoping to see herons and egrets, perhaps a bird of prey like a marsh harrier, and maybe even a glimpse of one of our most elusive animals. If I'm lucky, and I mean really lucky, I might be able to glimpse the resident otters. But in this landscape with all this vegetation, that is going to be incredibly difficult. There are just a few lowland wetlands left in Britain, and this is one of the most important in the world. The Somerset Levels are a vital stopover for migrating birds and one of the largest feeding grounds in Europe. The wetlands are fed by 8 rivers and lie just 3 meters above sea level in lowlands between the Mendip and Quantock Hills. This low, flat terrain was once prone to flooding, and the meadows and fields here are crisscrossed with ditches, streams and rivers. When I'm out looking at wildlife, inevitably there's a lot of equipment, and it really helps to keep things well organised. In fact, I'm a bit fussy about that. I use a bag like this. These are designed for police patrols. Absolutely ideal. I can put my night vision equipment in there, my spotting scope, and even my microscope. It all fits in there really neatly. And in here I've got insect repellent, lens cleaning equipment, notebook, pen, hand lens, you know, all the things I might need. And that is a very neat way to organise it, which is then easy to manage things. The wetlands are an essential lifeline for the wildlife here. And with so much water, there's only one way to travel. Without a doubt, the best way to see wetlands is from a boat, and there's no better boat for that than the canoe. For me, gliding silently through these tranquil waters is just about the perfect way to spend a day. I can keep very quiet and get really close to the wildlife. This is the real magic of a canoe. The moment you get onto the water, you cease to be an alien exploring the environment from afar. You become intimate with the nature, the water, everything. Just over there's a lot of burreed leaves there, matted down. That's an old great crested grebe's nest. There are dragonflies going crazy, mating. Absolutely life everywhere, and it just reminds me how important these wetlands are in terms of habitat. You know, you'll hear people, conservationists, telling all the time about the importance of these places, but really, unless you can get into a boat and come close to them like this, it's difficult to fully appreciate the importance of those messages. Just in here there's a swan with her young. The male has come round here. He's having a close look at us. I'm going to come up behind this burr reed here. I won't go any closer than this. She's quite happy with me here, and I'm being very quiet and very still. We're both playing the cover game. I'm using a little bit of the reed for cover as I've approached, and she's keeping her chicks in cover too. Good mum. The male still watching from a distance. And if I had been a threat, he would have, of course, come over and challenged me, even at great risk to his own welfare, because in nature's terms, he's done his job. The chicks are reared, he becomes expendable, while the chicks and the mother must go on, because that's the future of the species.
These 3 juveniles, with their dark, smoky feathers, were born this spring. They'll stay with their parents until next winter, when they will gradually turn white. Peat has been dug from this boggy land since the Roman times, right up to the 1990s. This, along with thousands of years of drainage and grazing, has created an open landscape with pockets of fen, mire and reed beds. This greater reed mace, which grows naturally here, thrives in these shallow waters and has really taken hold since peat digging was stopped.
This plant here is an incredible source of food. Very often people mistake it for bulrush. At this time of year, this part here if I can break it. Wrapped in these leaves here is the tender young flowering spike of the plant. This can be cooked like sweet corn and just steamed, and quite tasty. You can also eat it raw. Doesn't taste half bad. You see this one here is still yellow. That's covered in pollen, and that pollen is good and edible. And I want to collect some of that, so I'm going to bend that over into this bag. Oh yeah, that's looking quite good. I've got enough in there anyway to make a small drop scone or something like that. Of course, if this was a much bigger area of reed mace, you could very quickly fill a whole sack full. And maybe our ancestors were doing that in this area long ago.
The waterways are a rich source of food for the birds here. They're also their transport, shelter and protection from predators. These wetlands have been associated with people for at least 6,000 years. This area was once known as the Summerlands because it was too wet to use in the winter, and from the word Summerlands came the name Somerset. It's an area steeped in history, archaeology and wildlife.
Walking through these nature reserves is a really tranquil experience. They're incredibly peaceful. You get this gentle sway of the breeze through the reeds. It's very timeless. In fact, there's a lot of archaeology here too, and what's particularly interesting is that because of the waterlogged conditions, wooden artefacts survive from as far back as 5,000 years ago. That's particularly interesting because in most of Britain, wood simply doesn't survive. So we end up with this super preponderance of stone tools, but we don't see anything of the everyday artifacts of life. And of course, most of those would have been made out of wood or woven from grasses and reeds and things like that.
Throughout history, our ancestors have lived and worked in the wetlands. In order to navigate through these deep waters and reach the dry islands nearby, prehistoric people built simple but very effective wooden trackways. The oldest, the Sweet Track, was built in 3806 BC.
It's just down here.
Steve Minnett is an expert on these primitive roadways.
Oh, look at that. Now, obviously, this is a modern reconstruction, isn't it? So
It is, but it illustrates the structure of the original Sweet Track and gives you some idea of how difficult it must have been to walk along it.
must have been very difficult to walk along it. So you've got one rail on the ground.
That's right.
And then 2 rails above it.
Yeah, so they were forced in obliquely,
Yep.
and that then creates the V shape
Yep.
in there, and the oak plank then sits on that, or balances on that perhaps.
What's it like to walk on?
I'll let you have a go.
Oh, look at that. Well, it works very well. That's amazing. And this stretched for 2 kilometres.
That's right.
Incredible. Well, that's quite a circus act. walking along that, they must have had incredibly good balance.
They must. Imagine doing that for 2 kilometres.
How our ancestors lived in the wetlands is a fascinating story, and the water here has helped to preserve a snapshot of history.
So tell me about some of the other items you've brought with you.
Well, these people were the first farmers, so they're amongst the first farmers in Britain.
And what were they using these bowls for?
Quite recently, samples from this pot have been examined for the lipid component that relate to food. And the result of the analysis of this bowl showed that it had actually contained milk products. So it's very early evidence for the processing of milk. And not only that, they think that it was butter.
That's really astonishing. So that contained butter how many years ago?
Nearly 5,000 years ago.
That's amazing. And what about those hazelnuts?
They are farmers, but they're still making use of the wild resources, naturally occurring hazelnuts. They weren't cultivating these. And we can imagine that they would have been catching fish and eels. And
I guess that last object here suggests that as well. I mean, that's very obvious. I mean,
it does.
Beautifully worked flint arrowhead. I've seen drawings of this particular arrowhead in books on archaeology, because this is one of the finest arrowheads ever found in Britain.
It is.
It is truly remarkable, and I mean, I've been making arrowheads for about 30 years, and I look at this and I can see straight away the skill of the craftsman who made it. And you can see, first of all, look at the beautiful symmetric shape that has been achieved. And if you were to look really carefully, you'd see running all the way across the face of this arrowhead are the small removal blades or flakes, micro blades, which is all done by pressure flaking. It's a real skill. But if I turn it edge on, then you really understand the skill of the workmanship, because it's as thin as a razor blade. In fact, if I was to squeeze it hard between my 2 fingers, I could snap it and crumble it to dust. It really is a work of art.
I'm here to try and get a sense of the history of this place, how it was formed and what shaped the land. But I'm also here because this is one of the best places in the country to watch birds in their natural habitat.
Without a doubt, the golden rule for seeing any sort of wildlife is about being quiet and particularly still and unobserved. You can use camouflage, you can use fieldcraft, but also you can use hides. Wow, this is lovely. That's fantastic. Wow. Little egret. That's a beautiful bird. It seems to be snatching insects, snatching at dragonflies by the looks of it.
These elegant little egrets are mainly fish eaters, but will also eat small frogs and insects. They're expert hunters. Watching them hunt is like watching a deadly ballet being played out.
That is an incredible, graceful bird.
When they kill, their dagger-like bill is extremely effective and accurate.
It's wonderful to watch. He's absolute, master of stalking in water. It's a lesson in the art.
Sharing these shallow waters is a sole grey heron. Like the egret, it hunts by patiently stalking and striking rapidly when prey comes into range.
It was going along, and all of a sudden, he took his neck and he made it look straight ahead. Moved in. Amazing.
Herons breed in colonies called heronries in trees close to water. I'm heading inland where this oak woodland grows naturally alongside the wetlands, peat bogs and reed beds. It's ideal habitat for herons and perfect for nest building. Tony Whitehead from the RSPB has been keeping a careful eye on these wonderful birds.
It feels like being in the rainforest, only looking up here into the canopy. For the herons here, you see a youngster there just sitting on that nest. That's right.
The heronries are used by successive generations. These juveniles are just beginning to stretch their wings, but not with any confidence yet.
You've got one on a nest and another youngster nearby. They don't look quite too sure of themselves, you know, clinging onto the branches, but a little bit awkward.
It is astonishing how long it takes before the birds can actually leave the nest, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it takes a while. I mean, these are big birds, slow metabolisms. It takes them a while to mature.
Yeah, you can just see the down on the top of the crown of the head there.
Yeah.
It's just not quite ready to go.
No, we're still waiting for Mum and Dad to get back with something to eat.
No, I mean, it's quite interesting because when herons nest, they always congregate like this. But when you see them in the wild, you very often see them in solitary.
They hunt solitary, they don't hunt in groups, but they're very, very colonial species like this one here. And this heronry alone, you've got it's 85 nests. There's a lovely thing with them as well. Obviously, these birds are, you know, they eat lots of fish and frogs and things like that, slimy creatures, and they tend to get rather grungy around their feathers. So to clean their feathers off, their middle toe actually has a built-in comb. It's pectinated, is what they call it, and they use this. They literally comb the dirt off, but even better than that, they have what's called powder down on their tummies, which are these brittle feathers, and they brush themselves with talcum powder, dry off all the mud, and then comb it clean.
It's astonishing, isn't it?
Which is an amazing bit of evolution.
What's the survival rate?
It depends on the weather. It's quite interesting. Hard winters really affect these birds, and so it'd be interesting to see at the end of the breeding season what the numbers are like this year and whether this hard winter has been hard enough to actually affect them.
It's such a privilege to see these graceful birds close up. Hopefully, this colony will continue to grow for many years to come. I've come to the wetlands in Somerset to explore these beautiful waterways, meadows and fields. This varied habitat is home to a wide variety of wildlife, and Tony Whitehead from the RSPB knows all the best places to see it. This marsh frog is easily identified by its grey vocal sacs. It's Europe's largest frog and a voracious predator.
I've got him in the scope now.
As a male, you've got those been calling earlier on.
You wouldn't think that something that small could make such an extraordinary noise.
They do. It is quite remarkable. What they do is, obviously they pump air out across their larynx, but then they inflate these two air sacs, and those are basically resonating chambers, just like you might have in a guitar.
It's quite remarkable. Can we get him to make the noise?
Well, we can. The nice thing with these is this is what they're doing is a territorial call. So the male is saying, "Here I am," is trying to attract females, and just like birdsong, trying to keep the other males away.
Yeah.
So if we play the call, we might, if we're lucky, get it to actually respond to us.
Okay. Here we go. Oh, he's responding to that.
There he goes. He's
moving.
See, he's actually moving. He's moving towards us.
Yeah. He's quite aggressive as well.
Just pause it. He's kind of like facing us off, I think, this one.
It certainly is. It's quite an intimidating stare, actually.
Mean, possibly.
Yeah. Well, we're quite privileged to be able to see it because normally you only ever hear them. They're so well camouflaged, they're difficult to spot. But these are not a native species.
No, these are not native species. So the marsh frogs were introduced to the UK in the 1930s, and the story goes that it was in Kent, and the wife of an MP down there decided that she would give her husband a present of some edible frogs. Couldn't find any edible frogs, and so the next best thing was these large marsh frogs, and 12 were shipped over from Hungary to her garden, released into her garden, and of course immediately they escaped from her garden and went down to Walham Marsh in Kent, and that was the first population.
Since their introduction, these frogs have become well established, but their impact on the native population is having a negative effect, and now they are being closely monitored. Perhaps they weren't such a good present after all. These wetlands have a worldwide reputation for bird life, but the surrounding boggy land can also throw up some unexpected surprises.
On a hot summer's day like this, it's lovely to take your shoes and socks off and walk barefoot in the peat here that's lovely and cooling. But you have to be careful where you tread, because bogs like this often have the title featherbed, and for good reason. You can suddenly find yourself very deep in. You can see that could cause you a bit of a problem. Very well named, isn't it? The ubiquitous quicksand. But environments like this are actually very interesting. One of the difficulties for the plants that live here is the extreme acidity of the ground here and the poor nutrients. And because of that, there are a few plants that really specialise in these conditions. One of them is this bog cotton. Seems to do very well here. Bog cotton or cotton grass. You get this lovely downy seed head here. There you see the seeds attached to the little bits of cotton, so they blow into the wind and propagate the plant throughout the bog. If you dry this, you can drop sparks on that to make fire. It's very useful.
The poor soil has meant that some plants have evolved different ways to obtain nutrients, using colourful pigments or fragrant nectar to attract insects to feed on.
But perhaps the most interesting plant growing here is also one of the most beautiful, and that's this. This is the sundew.
A beautiful but deadly plant. The tips of these hairs look like little droplets of dew, but in fact it's a glue. Any insects that land on the leaves become trapped, triggering the leaves to turn over and wrap themselves around the unfortunate victim before it's digested.
It's been estimated that over the course of a summer, a sundew like this may consume as many as 2,000 midges, making it one of the carnivorous secrets of the peat bog. One of the great things about nature is it constantly forces you to take a fresh view of the landscape around you. Take this ditch, for example. This is a typical feature of the Somerset Levels. Most people just say, oh, it's a ditch. But think of it another way. Imagine if you took all of this ditch and made it into a round pond. You'd have a big pond, and in there's all sorts of life competing for an existence. And to help me understand that, I'm going to meet this gentleman. Hello, Tony. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thanks, Ray.
Tony Sargent is an ecologist with the Somerset County Council.
Tony, tell me about these ditches, because these are a nationally important resource here, aren't they?
Absolutely. We've got some hundreds of miles of these ditches on the Somerset Levels and moors. If you look at a map, it's just crisscrossed by ditches, miles and miles of them.
And of course, they're man-made originally.
Absolutely. They serve a purpose. They're here to drain the land in the winter, to keep water on the land in the summer, and they act as a wet fence for the livestock as well. If you dip a net in there, put a trap in there, take it out, empty it, it's teeming with life.
This is invertebrate life.
Invertebrate life, yes. I mean, that's at the very bottom of the food chain, and that's really powering everything else on the wetland. And we've got some of them here.
Are these great diving beetles?
Yes.
I've never seen one as big as this before.
Well, that is a real rarity, and the Somerset Levels and Moors is one of the few places in the UK you'll actually find that. That's the king diving beetle.
It's well named.
I'm going to just pick one up, actually. Right. Pick this male up. He's going to have a go. He's having a go at my...
Look at that, he's trying to bite you.
Can you see there's a milky secretion
Yes.
coming off there. Now, I don't want to start a new craze, but I don't know if you'd like to sniff a beetle.
I can't smell very much today.
No, well, it's quite unpleasant to me, and that's a defensive reaction. And there's actually quite a lot of research going on into these chemicals, because they've got all steroids in and things like that may have medical applications.
Is that right? So much to know. So little time to learn.
Away from the open fields and ditches, I've managed to find a quiet, shady spot for a bit of lunch. I'm using the pollen I collected earlier. Not all pollen is safe to eat, but this reed mace pollen is a handy source of protein.
And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that in a little pancake mix. I'll mix that in and just cook that up.
During the Second World War, when flour was in short supply, people from this area regularly added reed mace pollen to their flour ration to make it go further.
You get really good colour in the pancake because of the pollen. And that's it, done. One pollen-enriched pancake. Absolutely delicious. Gives it a flavour and has greatly improved its nutritional value.
I'm in the wetlands of Somerset, a vast area of waterways, marshes and reed beds. This rich habitat is one of the most important sites of its kind in the world.
This area here is the oldest of the peat bogs in the Somerset levels. It dates back to pre-Roman times when I think back then it would have been a raised bog. It's interesting that we hear a lot about, you know, the wonders of the tropical rainforest and how much insect life there is there, and of course that's true. But if you come out into an area like this on a hot summer's day, all you can actually hear around you is the sound of British insects. It's quite incredible what's here.
These lakes, ponds and streams are perfect habitat for dragonflies and also their cousins, the damselfly. This female damselfly is laying her eggs as she hovers over the water. She's being escorted by her mate, who literally hangs on to her to prevent other rogue males from getting a look in and fertilising her eggs.
One of the real acrobats of the insect world, one of the most stunning displays has to be that put on by dragonflies. I find them absolutely fascinating to watch, quite astonishing creatures. And I'm about to meet a man who knows a lot more about them than I do.
Mark Steer, a conservationist with the Somerset Wildlife Trust, is an expert on these beautiful insects.
How you getting on, Mark?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks.
They seem to me to be very gutsy insects.
They are indeed. I mean, they really are sort of the top predators of the insect world, especially around here. Each of their four wings moves independently, so they can flap their wings for maximum lift, maximum thrust, whether they want to go in reverse or forwards, and they can get up to speeds of over 50 miles an hour. Some dragonflies have been clocked at.
There are several features of the dragonfly that are very obvious to people. I mean, they have the most enormous eyes.
They do. They've got some of the largest eyes in the insect kingdom. They're called compound eyes, lots and lots of lenses. Now, something like a housefly would have maybe 3,000 lenses in each eye. A dragonfly has up to 30,000. It gives it amazing visual acuity. While I was doing my survey, I did find you this one.
Oh, look at that.
This is a male emperor dragonfly. I'll give you him and take her
Astonishing.
away.
Listen to the noise he makes.
Now,
You can actually feel the energy that this
Yeah.
insect's got. You know, I've often thought, you know, the Spitfire has got to be the most beautiful aircraft, but these have got to be the most beautiful insects, aren't
they
they?
are absolutely fantastic.
I mean, they're perfection.
Both dragonflies and damselflies lay their eggs in or near water, often on floating plants. When the larva is ready to turn into an adult, they leave the safety of the water and climb up the reeds, where the exposure to air causes the larva to start breathing and shed its skin before turning into these beautiful creatures. Perfectly designed for speed and agility, some species have remained unchanged for 250 million years.
So this dragonfly spent 2 years underwater,
Yep.
has emerged and taken wing. What lies ahead?
Not a lot. He's got to the end of the summer to feed up, find a mate. She will lay her eggs, and then come the winter, not much future for either of them.
If this is the dragonfly's last tango, I think we ought to release him.
I think so, yep. Been there.
Let's see how
enough.
it goes. Yeah, look, yeah, all right. We're going to let you out. We're going to let you out now. You've done your bit. Thank you very much for letting us have a closer look at you. Here. There, look at that. That's stunning. Here we go. There we go.
There he
He's off.
goes.
Fantastic. Didn't want to leave.
He didn't. He was enjoying his moment of fame.
Here in the wetlands, these dragonflies play a vital part in the food chain.
Now there's the great threat to the dragonfly.
That's a bird that can certainly handle it on the wing, no difficulty. That's a hobby. A master of aerial combat, if you like. It can fly really fast in the air, maneuver, pluck an insect from the air, and even eat it on the wing. It's an astonishing bird.
Reaching speeds close to 100 miles an hour, these small falcons are a match for even the most agile prey. Hobbies hunt late in the evening, seeking insects which appear at dusk, as well as these returning swallows looking for reed beds to roost in.
Lovely markings, the feathers just ruffling in the wind. Bright yellow talons. That's made my day.
And the day just keeps getting better. There's another hawk hunting nearby. This marsh harrier is drifting over the reed beds and meadows, hoping to surprise its prey. Like the hobby, it's a great flyer, but its skill lies in flying at very slow speeds, making it easier to see any frogs or small mammals.
Wow, really being treated to a display today.
The dramas played out here in the water and the skies draw me back to the wetlands year after year.
It's just an astonishing area. Wonderful.
There's something else here which I'm desperate to see. This is perfect otter country. Here there are riverbanks, lakes and streams with plenty of thick vegetation providing cover. Otters are at the top of the food chain, so any sign of them here is a healthy indicator that these wetlands are flourishing. But finding an otter is not going to be easy.
This is a very good place to look for otter tracks. I've got water here and I've got water there. This is kind of just a walkway coming along here. The otters traversing this terrain will tend to come across here and leave their trails. So I'm just looking for disturbance in the foliage. I've got some here by the looks of it. This looks promising. Of course, there are other things that could be using this area as well. Mink, water voles, even badger. We've got some bruising in this root here, discoloration. That's quite fresh. This is an alder root. This was done yesterday. But there are also claw marks coming up the bank. And this looks like otter. The width of the claw marks suggests the otter track. Now, otters have webbed toes, and they have 5 toes, both front and rear, in their track, and their claws show. And that's what I'm looking at here. So what's gone on here is there is an otter trail coming up this path. It looks to me like an otter has come up here in the night. Now, when the otter comes up here, we know it's going to be heading to water across the other side. There should be an adjoining trail the other side of the track. And there is. You can see here where this grass has been pushed down. Have a really close look. As the trail goes down here, it divides. On this side it goes very steeply straight into the water. On that side it's angling off a little bit, suggesting that perhaps if they go in down this way, they might be heading off along the edge of the waterway. That would be my guess. But let's have a closer look. On this bramble here, it's been smoothed off, whereas up here it's sharp and prickly. So you can see here the otters are going underneath here. Great to see. Now the classic sign of an otter is its droppings, which have a special name, spraint. Now I haven't seen any of those yet, but I'll keep looking.
I'm pretty certain there are otters living in these waterways, but I need to find out if they were in this area recently, and that means testing my skills as a tracker. I'm in the wetlands of Somerset, one of the richest habitats in our country. I'm on the trail of an otter, and I think I'm getting close.
Now this is a really promising area. Here we've got a ditch coming in through here and a pond there, and an otter trail going off in that direction and another one going that way. So this is a junction of 2 trails. Now, you've got this bundle of grass here. Now, I've never seen one of these in the flesh before, but I believe that is an otter castle. As part of their scent marking of their territory, they look for natural mounds in the landscape to leave a spring to dropping on top of. But where you don't have natural mounds, they'll create them like this. And I'm right, look, just beside it, that is a very dry otter spraint. And you can see there's some feather in there by the looks of it. Lots of bones crunched up. And sometimes you find fish scales. And the thing about these otter spraints is they have a very distinctive odour. It's not unpleasant, it's quite sweet smelling. So that's proof positive that there are otters in this area, that if they're marking a territory, they must be here.
Although I'm convinced otters are here, I've disturbed their habitat and they won't reveal themselves until I've long gone. I need to leave this area and return a little later at dusk, when hopefully, if I'm very quiet, I'll get a chance to see these very shy and elusive creatures.
Aren't they beautiful? Have a look at this swan here. This is a mute swan. There's a male there. They always look very placid, don't they? But actually they're quite aggressive birds. The males will fight with each other and try to push each other's heads under the water. They also vigorously defend their territories, and they do this thing where they push their wings up to make themselves look big and impressive. It's been the inspiration for a lot of china ornaments. I've got a few more up here, look, in the grass. So just walk gently up towards them. Hello. Oh, you see the wings there, look. You see how he's putting his wings up? He's trying to make himself look more impressive. Oh, yeah, have a good stretch. If they're alarmed, they'll let you know. They'll hiss and put on a pretty good display. They're a very powerful bird.
There are hundreds of miles of waterways, and the River Parrett is one of the main rivers here. It's also one of the main highways for an extraordinary creature living beneath these waters.
All right then, Pete, shall we see what you've got?
Let's see what we've got.
Peter Sibley from the Environment Agency has an interesting catch to show me.
So we've had these fight nets in overnight, certainly hoping. Here we go.
There we go. Oh, yes. That's promising. Look at that. Fantastic. I think eels are one of the most amazing animals on the planet.
We're particularly interested in eels in this country at the moment because they've undergone this massive drop in population, probably 95% crash since the 1980s and before. So it's crunch time now for this species in Europe and in this country.
Should we have a look at what you've got?
Got him.
Eels are incredible animals and an essential part of the wetlands.
Calm down.
These have travelled over 4,000 miles from the Sargasso Sea near the Bahamas just to get to this point.
The adult silver eels will spawn over there and millions of young will be produced, millions of eggs are laid. They hatch out into this almost leaf-like larval stage, and these drift back in the ocean currents towards North Africa, Europe.
What happens then?
They start to pick up the scent of our fresh waters, and as they start then to be able to do some kind of movement under their own steam, they'll move towards our estuaries as what we know as glass eels. So they're unpigmented, little wormy things, a couple of eyes, that's about it. They mill around in the estuaries for some time then, and they'll feed, and they'll slowly start to pigment and turn into what we'd probably all know as an elva, a little bootlace brown thing. That's the stage then where they start to come up into our rivers, and they'll try and get up into habitat like this.
So the eels are here for some time, aren't they?
Yeah, they're here for 15 or 20 years or so, and they'll stay there and feed up for all that time in fresh water.
This is a mystery, isn't it? Is that?
Yeah.
After 15 or 20 years, suddenly there's this
overwhelming urge to return to where they were spawned.
And then they go through a process that we call silvering. And basically they're preparing for life in the ocean. So they start to reabsorb their digestive tract, they've fattened up, and at that point they'll head out, down the river, into the estuary, and across they go over towards the Sargasso.
They really are a creature with a tremendously strong spirit. I can't help but respect them. So I guess time now is to release them, but when you think, they have the most adventurous of lives, don't they? And these eels have also become television stars. So just another adventure on their journey. With dusk approaching, these wetlands begin to take on a totally different atmosphere. This is my best chance of seeing an otter, but it's going to be a waiting game.
I've got a feeling it's going to be one of those days. Hang on.
And then just when it seems I'm out of luck, I spot something.
I think there might be a fish.
An otter gliding through the water, out on patrol.
That's lovely. Beautiful. Just going to come in the sunshine there. Lovely. It's a sight that was once very common in Britain, and then there was a decline in the otter population. We used to hunt otters, but that really wasn't the main problem. I think the main problem was the loss of habitat and pollution. So I'm glad to say that they are returning and finding their way into rivers where they haven't been seen for generations. Lovely. Great to watch.
There's nothing more rewarding than seeing a wild otter in this landscape. For me, it's a symbol of how we might all live in harmony with nature.